Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars: A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft, and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, the commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Table Talk. Welcome to my home, welcome to the office, and welcome to the show. It is so good to see you, and you might notice, check this out, I have generally the blue lighting back, which is fantastic. Like a while back ago, like there was a storm at the house and every single light bulb, like Wi-Fi enabled light bulb in my house got reset. And so I was like, oh my God, like I just hadn't even started to reset the light bulbs. But I started that like, a week ago or something like that. So here we have the blue light bulbs back for Table Talk. So here we got the proper lighting back. So I'm very happy about that. Tonight, we are talking about House of the Dragon, specifically episodes 1 through 3. It's been a while. Episodes 1 through 3, and together to talk about this is Douglas A. Burton. Welcome, Douglas.
All right. Very cool. Yeah. House of the Dragon is off and running.
House of the Dragon is up and running. I was expecting to do a lot more conversations on the subject, but we did the immediate reaction to episode 1, and then I got sick, and so I was just not available and whatever else. But let's see, we got Sable Phoenix here. We got Tomocrat here.
What's up, guys?
Tomocrat right here. We've got Sherry Lee here. Who else do we have here in the chat? Let's see. Bacon Gaming is here. We've got lots of people here. I thought this would be important. So now we can talk about the House of the Dragon episodes 1 through 3. When we did episode 1, we did kind of a spoiler-free analysis, but we can go kind of deeper here because I still love it.
Oh yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, House of the Dragon is it's so well written, and it does remind me of how I used to feel watching Game of Thrones, which was also very well written. The difference is House of the Dragon really focuses on a much smaller group of people. So you're getting Game of Thrones length episodes with a much smaller crowd. So it's very detailed, and you really get to follow these characters. So it has a different feel to it since it's so much more localized. It's the Targaryens mainly.
I have been paying attention to how much story they can tell about what's apparently going on in the realm on particularly a budget that is around people at tables in different castles.
Right.
You know,
I'm gonna turn on my volume here. Hold on.
They are stretching that. I was looking for my book over here because I have not yet read Blood and Fire. I've tried twice.
Oh, okay.
Okay, then that's so, and people have been laughing at me because I have failed to buy the book twice. I was like, oh my God. I thought there was like an illustrated version or something like this. So first I bought The World of Ice and Fire.
Right.
I bought this first, and this is very nice, but this does not tell you the story of the Blood and Fire. And then where my next book is, there is another book that I was looking at before I started getting in here that is an illustrated guide to Targaryen history.
Right.
Where did this go? I don't know where my book went. But there's another book that's the illustrated, but that is still not Blood and Fire. And I have been laughed at, I know, on the Heath Geekverse channel. It's like, if you would like to buy a book called, Blood and Fire, just look at the cover and see if the name of it says Blood and Fire. But for some reason, I thought there was an illustrated guide to this particular war that replicated that information. And apparently I was completely wrong. So I bought a couple of different books and none of them have been Blood and Fire. So I've not read this yet.
I think it's Fire and Blood.
Fire and Blood. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Fire and Blood.
So I listened to Fire
I have
and
that
Blood
in my Amazon basket right now. But I'm just saying right now I've tried a couple of times to actually get some information with an illustrated guide, but apparently that does not exist. Okay. Yes. All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to read that. But on the other hand, I think it's good. So this is a perspective of people who've not read, you said you read that book a long time ago.
Yeah, I read it, I think in like 2018. It was like maybe 5 years ago or somewhere around there. And at the time, Game of Thrones, I think, was still going strong or had just ended or something. And I was just hungry for more. And I heard that Fire and Blood was really good. It was like the Silmarillion for Westeros and Essos. And so I read it, but obviously at that time, there was no TV show called House of the Dragon. So when I was reading it, it was all very abstract. And to make matters worse, everyone's name was Viserys and Daemon and Aegon. The Rise. Oh, that's pretty bad.
I picked up this. So I missed, people laugh at me because I've missed twice to be able to read this. Because first I picked up this. Okay. The World of Ice and Fire, yep. Which is a great book, but it does not tell you, Fire and Blood. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. So I guess I just completely misunderstood because this is kind of an illustrated guide to the Targaryens.
Okay.
I mean, it's a really nice book. I mean, absolutely.
Nice.
It looks like an illustrated history of the Targaryens. But it is still not Fire and Blood. So I have in my Amazon cart to buy Fire and Blood. But like I said, so So I keep trying to get it, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, at least when you're watching this, it's an appreciation of just what is put on screen. I've been paying attention to what some people are saying about differences, some of the major differences. There are probably a lot of minor differences, but some of the major differences between what is put in the book and what is put on screen, and we can talk about that, absolutely. But I'm just as far as watching season 1 and the first 3 episodes of season 2, I've just been watching them fresh and been enjoying them.
Right, absolutely. Well, and what's weird is 5 years ago when I read the book, I was enamored with it. It was actually, I read it, I zipped through it. Like I said, it's more abstract. It's like reading a history book, right? It's not like reading a fictionalized account with dialogue and characterization and everything. It's like a historical overview of different eras of of House Targaryen, and it's awesome. I couldn't get enough of it. So what was funny is about 5 years ago, I was telling everybody these stories as they were fresh in my head. And then, of course, those are short conversations because nobody else has a common frame of reference. And you just kind of share some of the big, interesting, juicy bits about how House Targaryen rips themselves to shreds, basically, in the war. It's called the Dance of the Dragons. And then you forget about it. And then Game of Thrones sucked in season 8. So, really, Game of Thrones went from peak highs, hysterical pop culture high, to dead silent. I wasn't getting stuff.
I've never seen anything drop from pop culture in that way.
Totally. In fact, I began to remove references. I had a bunch of references to Game of Thrones because now, if you go back to 2019 and 2020, I had studied Game of Thrones because, especially at that time, had so many female characters. You had Daenerys Targaryen, you had Arya Stark, you had Sansa Stark, you had Brienne of Tarth, you had Cersei Lannister. It was a cavalcade of these great female characters. And what's weird is, as I was writing The Heroine's Labyrinth, I started to remove references to Game of Thrones characters because they no longer had any power to them like they used to. People didn't remember everything. So I left a handful of references in there, and I left one big analysis of Game of Thrones female characters in a giant paragraph dedicated to it. But it was just weird how this lost so much cultural relevance. It was really amazing.
Absolutely. It was absolutely amazing.
Well, and then when House of the Dragon was announced, I didn't care. I was like, what? They're going to try a Game of Thrones dude, if Game of Thrones lost power, then a prequel, who cares? I had no interest in it. There was so little information about it. It was announced at roughly the same time that Rings of Power was announced. And I had no interest in that because it just seemed like the wrong people were working on it, and they didn't seem like they knew what they were doing. And these shows were getting budgets that just didn't seem justified. So what's bizarre is that the $1 billion production of Rings of Power went up against an unasked for, unwanted, unloved House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones prequel, and within 1 week, the tables turned so decisively in favor of Game of Thrones as a franchise that was absolutely not dead.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Rings of Power was mortally wounded in the opening minutes. So I've never seen such a turnaround. So when people say Star Wars is dead, yeah, maybe, but it could turn around if you put good writers on it.
And you can also just watch House of the Dragon. I would have no problem with somebody who knows nothing about the Game of Thrones or whatever else is hey, let's just watch House of the Dragon. You can completely do that.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. In fact, and I might have mentioned this the last time, but one thing I really appreciate about House of the Dragon is it doesn't do a bunch of cutesy callbacks to Game of Thrones, even though it's a prequel. And it's, you're going to get it no matter what. Even if you think of the prequels in Star Wars, hello there, Obi-Wan, or, I have a bad feeling. There's still all these references to the original trilogy. House of the Dragon makes a few references, but they really tone it down to the point where you don't even need to.
Yeah,
right.
Even in so in episode 3 of season 2, those are Dany's eggs.
Yes,
but that's not huge.
It's background,
right? That's there. So it's like, okay, there they are. That's and I have not watched this for myself, but I was reading on Reddit that the actor for Rhaenyra was like, didn't even know that at the time. Like, okay, no.
Oh, really?
Her dragon is the mother of Dany's dragons, and then here they are. You're seeing the eggs, and that's a very important point for those who understand the lore and the history. Because when I saw that, I was like, okay, I bet those are Dany's eggs. But
yeah,
it's not put in your face. I mean, in any way. I mean, you could watch that and not even notice.
Totally. Yeah, they don't draw any special attention to it. They give it just the amount of attention it needs for the episode, for their relevance in the episode. And so, but they do this all throughout. Like, there's that one reference in season 1 to the White Walkers.
Yeah,
the prophecy of the northern invasion and all that. But there's very little. I mean, they almost like threw away Game of Thrones, which is a huge risk.
Because let's just make our own show. Now, there's some exceptions to that. There are some exceptions that I will want to talk about, but by and large, when I was like, okay, this is Return to Westeros with its own thing, and that was very important to me, and that's why I loved it.
Right, and all these characters chew up their own space on screen. You've got each faction is there. There's new drama, and the characters immediately like wedge themselves into your imagination as all new players. It's a whole new game board, even though the settings are almost identical. King's Landing, the Vale, what's the other? Dragonstone, Harrenhal. It's the same game board, different pieces, and they're pulling it off.
Okay, so there are a lot of things. I don't know where we want to go from here. There are a lot of things that I think a lot of people were expecting to see, and not that because I have not read all of it, so I am not sure. I can think of 2 major set pieces in episode 1 and episode 3 that people are like, "What are you doing with this?" If you've read the book, they're like, "Why are you doing this?" So I have seen criticism, and I was, briefly reading this by, and I don't know firsthand because I have not read it. I was trying to, but I bought all the wrong books, so I don't know. I'll read it, and we'll come back to this. But with like Blood and Cheese, like there's a tremendous amount of controversy about Blood and Cheese in this.
Okay.
So Blood and Cheese is the death of the child at the end of season 1, season 2, episode 1.
Right. Okay.
We've got these assassins who are coming in, and yes, so it was true that like when I was reading the showrunner, he's like, okay, so at the end of season 2, episode 1, we're spending a lot of time with the bad guy or with the assassins. We're spending a lot of time with the assassins who you don't know. We're spending a lot of time with them, and then we're trying to come to a conclusion here. And a lot of the people that I have been reading are saying that this was an extreme missed opportunity because the Blood and Cheese incident, Blood and Cheese being the 2 assassins, this was supposed to be a scene that was comparable to the Red Wedding.
Oh, really?
That this has been something really massive, and that's why like I have not read any of the book. I'm trying to. I'm going to go back and read them. We will discuss all of this once I read them. But I'm seeing that I saw a lot of commentary that scene was not sufficiently or did not have sufficient impact that it should have. Because that should have been Red Wedding level impact.
Really? Well,
and
then,
I'm understanding that. Like, I think, am I right? Please, somebody in the comments, please tell me that they have changed the fact that there was a son there in the TV show. There was a son and a daughter there, but in the book there were two sons there, and the queen was really having to choose who was going to die at that point, and that this
Which
is
of
like
the two sons?
and this is like a major psychological turning point in this whole show that was not very well done. So I'm hearing in the TV show, because you've got a daughter, you've got a son. What is her name? The queen. The queen is. I've heard criticisms for the depiction of the queen here.
Really?
She runs in. Well, what I keep hearing as far as criticisms of the Queen Co. is that, well, it's that she's always portrayed as neurodivergent, and so she can have this very strange response to things, but that isn't even very realistic. I've heard, and like I said, I got to read this, but like here we have a situation where you have a mother who is having to choose between which children die, like which child dies, and that it was not expressed as adequately and as horrifically as it could have been on screen.
Well, that may be so, but you're going to have a hell of a time leading off with a red wedding level event to start a season, because you can do an inciting type of moment, which is never going to be as good as a climactic event. So if they're trying to achieve that level, if it's a missed opportunity, then they may just be a victim of bad timing, because if you're at this stage of the story and you have to start season 2, well, you don't have all the time for a big setup, and not everyone is totally fresh on season 1.
Well, and it's not even true that you know who the characters are going to be. Like one of the weirdest lines that I had seen in this was when Otto, as the Hand of the King, tells Alicent, "You have a child in Old Town," and she's like, "Oh, really? I do." Right? Because there's Daemon, and I don't know this because I have not read it. I got the Fire and Blood in my Amazon shopping carts and come in, and I'm gonna read it, and we will do analysis on that. But I have heard in multiple times that like whether or not Daemon, another child of Alicent, is going to be in this show at all, and people were waiting for this, and then they did give a really weird shout out, like when Sir Otto goes, "You have a son in Old Town," and Alicent's like, "Oh yeah, I do," which you've never heard before. And all of a sudden introducing this character of Daemon, we do have the issue in this story, the television version of the storytelling, when we're like, okay, early on in season 1, we're not sure how many characters we're going to be able to introduce. And so a lot of people are like, okay, we're not going to be able to introduce Daemon into this, and like what's the ramifications of that. And then here we're going to have to shoehorn him in to season 2 by saying, "Hey, Alicent, don't you remember you have a son who's in Old Town?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, okay," to introduce that into this. So we are dealing with we are dealing with that in this TV show.
Right. Well, but also that you have to go back to the writing. There's enough room in if Game of Thrones taught us anything, it's that you can introduce as many characters as you want, as long as you write them well. Because Game of Thrones had so many even the side characters seem to have arcs, and the side characters of side characters would take over a scene. And, so you can do whatever you want. So I think if they're going to introduce a character like that, I think you're right in saying that that's a pretty weak way to do it.
I would even push back about that a little bit, because we have this theory. Now, it may not be your theory, but it's been kind of my theory. Like if you're telling a story narrative arc, that by the time you reach the halfway point, that you should be able to tie up the entire story with everything that has been introduced up to that point. You shouldn't introduce new material past the halfway point. Okay. Now maybe I'm wrong about that, but I do tend to kind of lean toward this. That like if you're telling a 7-book story, then by the time you get to book 3.5, you really need to have introduced everything that you need to tie up the story, you know. And so we have that problem, I think, in something like A Song of Ice and Fire, the books. I'm talking about the books here. That George R. R. Martin will introduce whole new characters, whole new story arcs in what is beyond the halfway point in the story. Phagon, F-Agon, the fake Aegon, something like that. And I know that a lot of people, my brother and sister-in-law included, are like tuning out that like, okay, we're how long into this book series? And now you're introducing this whole new character that could be potentially a fake Aegon and Targaryen pretender that like, okay, you know, this is supposed to be a 7-book series or whatever, and now we're 4 books into it. Now you're throwing me a whole new character with a whole new arc, you know, which I do sympathize with. Like I'm like, okay, this is something like if you're not paying attention to this, you can introduce a whole new character. But if you are, you're like, okay, we can't introduce a whole new character that you have not even ever heard of 5/7 of the way into the story.
Well, there's no hard rules, right? There's no hard rules. However,
I know.
I think it's safe to say that you don't want to introduce a lead character or pivotal character to the conclusion that late. I think, you know, because you can introduce heroic partners, you can introduce all day long into stories. You can even introduce other plot lines, but you always have to be careful because when it comes time to end, all those plot lines have to be pretty much wrapped up. You know, I ran into that with Faraway Bird. You know, she ends up in part 3. I'm introducing a whole new set of characters when she goes to North Africa. And so you can do it, but it must be essential to the story. It must serve your lead story. And it cannot be like Deus Ex Machina level stuff to where you're introducing the pivotal character to solve all the problems that deep into your story, because then it just won't feel authentic.
No, I hear you. And I like this was one of the reasons that Peter Jackson talked about his lack of inclusions of other characters in The Return of the King.
Like Tom Bombadil.
No. Tom Bombadil would have been in the Fellowship of the Ring. But so he excluded Tom Bombadil from the Fellowship of the Ring, the first one. But he was like, okay, by the time we get to, I'm sorry, what?
What were you talking about? He excluded characters from The Hobbit?
No, The Return of the King. So the final one, right? So by the time, so he was like, so very notably, by the time we get to the Return of the King film, the only new character that is introduced is Denethor.
Right. Okay.
So he introduces Denethor, much to people like me. I have a problem with that because I was looking at some other characters. But he was like, but I understand where he's coming from. Peter Jackson was like, okay, this is the final third of the film. I have got to conclude this film. I can't introduce a whole bunch of new characters with a whole bunch of new motivations and everything else. So he made a deliberate decision that the only new, major character that was going to be introduced was Denethor. Now, these are longer films, so he introduced Denethor. Like, the character that I absolutely wanted him to introduce that he absolutely failed to do, that makes me so angry, although I understand why he did it because of the storytelling, is Prince Imrahil. Like, I freaking love Prince Imrahil. Prince Imrahil is one of the most awesome characters in all of the Lord of the Rings. He is one of my favorite characters. He is why I would want in a role-playing game to play the Swan Knights of Dol Amroth. that he shows up. Prince Imrahil shows up when Eowyn is on the battlefield wounded. He shows up. And by the way, this is the only portion of Lord of the Rings which has something to do with metal armor, because Imrahil holds his vambrace to Eowyn's mouth and sees the mist of her breath upon his vambrace. So he is wearing metal armor, which most everyone else in Middle-earth is not. But the canonical reason that you could have metal plate armor in Middle-earth is because Prince Imrahil, Knight of Dol Amroth, Prince of Dol Amroth, and his knights, he does have a metal vambrace on. And so I understand exactly what type of armor he might be wearing. But beyond that, but what I'm saying is that Peter Jackson decided we're not going to introduce those characters. We're not going to do that.
Or they made that decision while writing the script and trying to include them. Sometimes,
right. You might have tried to be like, okay, this is not right. Like, listen, we are now approaching what is supposed to be the third act of this story. Like, right. I can't introduce a whole bunch of news, because people are expecting, what is happening with these previous people, and then here. Gothmog is, but he's really minor. Right. He's really minor. They do introduce. I'm talking about any kind of major. They don't introduce any major character into 5. Right. We'll talk. We'll have to talk about plate armor because Prince Imrahil's vambrace is canonical evidence to me that there is plate in Middle-earth. But to me, that means that Prince Imrahil and his Swan Knights are the most advanced armored warriors in Middle-earth. And so they are like the most advanced armor that maybe 1250 could provide. Because you see that. And I see that. I'm like, okay, because you could have a metal vambrace and also greaves or something like that with the most advanced, and I see that. But I'm talking about the absolute most advanced pinnacle armored warriors of Middle-earth. They are wearing a metal vambrace and potentially metal greaves. That's what I'm saying. We'll talk about that later.
Wow, that's great.
That's why I do not like. I love so much. This is getting off topic, but I love so much about the visuals of Peter Jackson's Middle-earth, except for the amount of plate armor in Gondor. That does not work.
So you feel like that undermines the whole original layer?
Right. Oh yes, I do. I completely do. I now from the visual perspective of the movies, I understand the desire to contrast Rohan with Gondor. Because when you look at Rohan, and the movie does that well, so I understand that the movie does that well. Rohan is wearing scale armor. They're wearing a lot of scale. I would have made that male, but you mean when you see the riders of Rohan, they're wearing a lot of scale armor, and then visually when you look at Gondor, they're wearing a lot of plate
armor.
Right. And so I understand. So it's not like I'm like, why did you do that? I don't understand. I'm so upset. No, I do understand. I understand the visual difference they are trying to articulate from the movie perspective between Gondor and Rohan. That's why it's like that. But I do not believe that's right. I would have done that another way. Tolkien himself was talking about the Bordeaux tapestry, and that's about what they were looking for. So I would have had the Knights of Dol Amroth, because I love the Knights. The Swan Knights of Dol Amroth, that is so classic. I would have had them ride in. They would have been predominantly male clad, but they would have been the only ones who are wearing pieces of plate armor, also with like the swans on their helmet and stuff like that, and be like, oh my God, that is the pinnacle of Middle-earth armory. Where did we get on that with the House of the Dragon? I don't.
We were talking about introducing characters late into a story, and why they didn't. Right. Okay. You were saying that that the criticism you discovered or came across about season 2 thus far of House of Dragon was that the murder of the baby heir to the throne was a missed opportunity, in that it was meant to be a red wedding level event in the storytelling.
It was not.
And the way it was introduced in season 2 film wise was that there wasn't 2 sons, it was a son and a daughter instead. And it led off the season, so it was treated more like an inciting event rather than an epic, a phenomenal event midway through the story that we built up to.
Yes. So I have been big on. So that was a criticism that I do have of George R.R. Martin, that he is introducing things very late into his story.
Well, but also what really triggered the off ramp was Alicent's son in Vale, or no, in Old Town, that was introduced to us via dialogue.
By a dialogue that's very late. I understand that's because probably in season 1 they didn't know whether or not they were actually going to introduce this character, so they left it ambiguous. But it still made it a weird thing in this. That made it a weird thing.
But you can write in some of this you can write in that this was meant to be a secret.
Yeah, I know. But ideally you would prep that.
Ideally, right. Correct.
Right.
Ideally, you would introduce it.
I'm just saying that it feels like this is something that was unknown whether or not it was going to be there, and they decided that, okay, we're going to add it.
Yeah, there's evidence of the real world in the omission of this character.
It sounds like, because if someone goes, remember, you do have a son that's over there in that city. Like, a mother knows that. I mean, a mother knows that. You, like, don't give me that. Don't give me that. Yeah. But okay, so we have the blood and cheese incident, but then the other major incident that I've been hearing about is Rhaenyra coming to talk to Alicent in the Sept.
Yeah.
Okay. What about this?
What's that?
So what about this?
So I don't know how it is in the book.
Well, I understand. I have not read it, but I understand this is a scene that is not in the book. That this is something.
So I thought this might be a cringe part of the writing. I didn't know, because there is an idea out there. You'll find it in some feminist discourse that women wouldn't start wars. They would always find a diplomatic solution, and that the reason wars exist, it's like because males are prone to this. So the way this discussion was set up, and that, by the way, I don't think that that's exactly true. History has not bore that out necessarily. I will say that there, even in the writing that I've discovered, I do have what I call the female diplomat. So there is some what's the word? Precedent, not just some precedent, but a long precedent, a long-standing tradition of female diplomacy in story and in history. But that doesn't mean all wars will be avoided. I think that's a very naive statement. That's like the people who made the League of Nations saying, we solved war, and then 20 years later, World War II happens, with nuclear bomb. So anyway, but there is that idea that women will solve this through diplomacy, and only stupid guys go to war. So the way it was set up in this was, I know what we could do to spare war. I will, the 2 queens that are at each other's throats, that, their relationship has been severed. They have created 2 different factions based on 2 different bloodlines and 2 different plays for power, Rhaenyra and Alicent, that they were going to solve this by discussion. So it was set up, and I was like, oh God, are they going to run with the idea that they're going to solve all this war through a woman to woman, heart to heart discussion. And it started that way. They meet in the sept. They kneel in front of the candles that are all, and they start talking. And it seems like they're making headway, and they're trying to see through the cloud of power that has set them against each other. And yet, I was relieved by the reality that the writers kept in there, that some things you don't just talk out. Some things are unmendable. And this is such a rift. You can't just talk this one out. And thankfully, the show doesn't go there. Queen Alicent, and it's a great scene.
Well, it is a good scene. I think it is a good scene.
Or let me put it ends in a great way that had me going, oh, man, I love that. Are we doing spoilers?
No. This is spoilers because we're beyond. We're not immediate reaction.
So they do the hey, we're women. We don't do wars, right? And then it's like, well, but you usurped my throne. And the other one's like, yeah, well, I have a right to the throne. I'm like, okay, right back to the problem, guys. You're not just going to talk this out. You both have valid claims in your heads, and this is where wars come from. No one's going to back down. And sometimes to back down is to be annihilated by your enemy. You don't just make peace. That's why all heirs to the throne or rivals to the throne throughout history are found murdered in their bed. And whether it's in feudal Japan or feudal England, rivals to the throne are murdered. So when you have rivals, you don't necessarily just talk it out and everyone shakes and they're all friends. So what that we find out is the context brought up into the open between the two queens of what was said on King Viserys' deathbed. If you can remember, you can recall from season 1, and I love season 1, Viserys is gaunt. He looks like a walking skeleton. His nostrils are big. His head and face they don't look right. And it's very disturbing and haunting and awesome at the same time. So, because he's kind of the idea of a good king in a sense. He might be a little weak, but at least he was a good guy is sort of the thought. And he's on his deathbed. He's barely aware of his surroundings. He thinks he's with Rhaenyra, his daughter, and he begins to recite the Song of Ice and Fire, which in the lyrics has King Aegon, the Conqueror, mentioned. And of course, Aegon is Alicent's son. So when she hears this, she understands the lyrics. She interprets and translates the king's deathbed lyrics as him bestowing the throne and the crown to her son Aegon. So when the two queens are sitting there, okay, side by side in the sept, and Alicent mentions the lyrics, Queen Rhaenyra stops her and she's like, whoa, did you just say the lyrics? That's the lyrics of a song. And Alicent begins to realize that she was not bestowed the throne, that she misinterpreted the lyrics of a song on a dying man's lips as succession. And she immediately is like, well, I'm not backing down. And she gets up and she leaves. And I was like, oh my God, she knows she doesn't have a claim. And yet she can't let go of this, obviously, at this point.
I want to talk about that. Yes, because I want to talk about that because if it's not something in the book, why they would have included that in this film, and I want to talk about that, but why it's potentially a good thing. But let's bring on Retro Nerd Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Retro's here.
Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Retro Nerd Girl. That's great.
How are you doing? I know that you said that your picture isn't working, but here, okay, your audio is. So here you are.
Yes.
Your picture's working fine. You're wearing a space helmet. You're clearly in space.
Yes, I will. I'll have pictures soon. I just wanted to really join you guys because I'm loving it so far. I know that it's a little bit different, a lot different, I would say, than the written material. As you guys were talking there, I was like, yes.
Yes, awesome.
This was the moment I'd been waiting for since the last season. Kind of like, are we gonna get this resolved? That what was heard was really, not for the current king, and it's like yeah, it was great. It was great.
Right. I agree with you. I thought, like I said, I started the scene kind of like not buying into it because let's be honest, it's a huge risk, almost to the point of incredulity that the queen is going to walk up in disguise through a hostile city. And it's even more unbelievable that Queen Alicent would be left unattended with potential assassins moving around in the Sept, because she's obviously in disguise. She made it in, Rhaenyra. So there was a lot this scene asked of me that for buy-in that I was like, I don't buy this scene. But by the end of it, I was like, my hands were in my head. I was like, oh my God, I love it. I was totally into it. So
I felt like this scene needed to happen. I'm not sure if this was the right way to do it, but I don't, because there is that, moment where you can sense her desperation, and there is desperation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Alicent, but it's just like, oh my goodness. And to be alone with Alicent for that long.
That was a lot.
That was asking a lot. Yeah,
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And, if I'll tell you what, so Alicent is the queen, right? Or, the queen regent or the dowager queen. What is her title?
Dowager. She's
Queen Dowager. That's right. So she said, I don't know about you, but if the Queen Dowager walks out, let's say I'm the bodyguard, and the Queen Dowager walks over there, kneels down, and I glance in, and someone's kneeling next to her, man, I'm pulling my sword, and I'm going to be like, hey, who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you hanging out with the queen? You're like inches away. This is dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think we covered it, but I mean, it's a big ask on the believability of the setup.
Well, from the storytelling perspective, I understand why you would want these two characters to have this conversation. I completely do. That you're going to have one, because potentially if you don't have this, they will never have it. And you set this up as they were best friends as they were growing up. So you want them to have one conversation. I understand that from the storytelling perspective, that here it is. So we want to bring them together. Also from the storytelling perspective, I would not duplicate what happened in season 2, episode 2 to season 2, episode 3, because we already had Daemon send in assassins that could, infiltrate it wasn't the keep, because I understand that Alicent was going out to the church. I understand that it's not technically the same, but I'm saying from the story beat, it's the same, that you have somebody coming up to the capital city who was able to infiltrate it. You did that in season 2, episode 2, and now you're about to do that again in season 2, episode 3. That was the weak point. The weak point.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could have done that in one or both, one or the other, one or the other, but not both.
Yeah.
And so I would have rewritten I understand from the story perspective why you want to have that scene. I absolutely do. So I would have rewritten it in a way that you don't replicate the appearance.
You know what you got to do
in King's
You have the queens agree to meet.
Yeah.
Under the rule, no dragons, and they each have a host of bodyguards and at least one advisor. Those are the rules to this meeting. And they meet in a location where they can talk. There's one advisor with them, and there's a host behind each one of them. And the tensions you could draw there, especially if the other bodyguards overhear some of it. So you didn't hear King Viserys, right? You would have the bodyguards being like, is that true? Because we're on the wrong side if it's true. You would create a lot of tension there, especially if the men start to draw their swords. You could even have a kerfuffle if you wanted with somebody. But my point is, I think, Heath, you make a great point. Instead of a double penetration of the castle, what I meant is, instead of sneaking into the castle twice, you would have to change that up to have a whole different scenario.
Why not? No, I completely agree. Why not have them agree to meet secretly in a third location and have that conversation? Because the duplication of sneaking into the capital city is a weak point.
And the castle should be on high alert after number one,
especially after that.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the part that's really kind of doesn't make sense. Is that now it should be on high alert. We're about to go at war. Everybody is sort of like gathering up their senses and kind of like, okay, we're about to go to war, and this is the perfect time to have the maximum amount of guards at the gate. You don't just let people walk in. Totally. That was a hard one for me, but I was, I really wish they had done something like what you had said, send a raven and say, hey, let's set up a meeting. Something
or accidentally, incidentally that, okay, you're going to be there and I'm going to be there. Like, let's sneak off to the secret place to have this meeting. That would have been better. That would have been better. And that would have mitigated a lot of the criticisms of that scene.
Well, I think you needed to, because I don't know how else these two pivotal characters, they're like the figureheads in some sense of the war, So I don't know how else these characters get together without massive security. And I think in other stories I'm thinking of, you set some sort of conditions, like no dragons, because if one dragon loses it, then we're all screwed. So you can't have two creatures there that could fry all of us. So it's got to be men only, one advisor, maybe one scribe, some rules to this, and then have them meet and discuss this, and then have the negotiations break down like they did in the Sept.
Yeah.
So
did you have criticism retro? I think we might not have been. You might have come in later, but criticism retro Nurgle of Blood and Cheese.
Do you know what that is?
Oh, you mean that was the first episode?
Yeah,
or
right.
Is it just the characters?
Well, no, the way they handle it, because the way I've been understanding, I haven't read it, is that that the death of the prince should have been like a Red Wedding level event, and that it was not, and we should have handled that. Have you considered that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when the way they're writing it now, because I'm trying to see like how they're writing it is sort of like they did, Aegon did like send everybody, all the rat catchers. He killed all those guys and hung them, and you can see them hanging, which is gross.
Yeah.
But he's also like, he was about to go to war, and then they stopped him, and then I believe, who was it? Larry's stopped him.
I think so.
Yeah, and so it was like I wanted a payoff for that too. I did want sort of a payoff, and I suppose the retribution for that was killing the twins last week, or sending the twins off to their doom. And I feel like when you read the story, it is really more like this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. But in this particular adaptation, it's more like they're playing chess pieces. Like, okay, we're getting your pawn son. We're taking out the two rooks. I sacrificed my rook for your rook. It's sort of like they're playing chess in a way. I like that, but I also think the books are way more savage.
They are more savage.
Just so much more that you can think of as far as psychological trauma that is going on in these stories. And even though you're getting the excitement of like, okay, what will this character do next? I know what they might want to do or what they're capable of, but what is going to happen next? And I kind of really disappointed in some of them. I wanted them to get a little bit more, just a little bit more savage, and
When
but I do
did
like
you
it.
read the books?
Actually, the first
Fire and Blood, you talking about?
Yeah. That was when the first season happened, and I was
Okay,
like,
so you
"What
read
is
it like
this
last
story?"
year.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? What is this? This story? And so I was like, oh wow, this is crazy.
I'll recap it. I read it about 5 years ago, and it was all very, like you said, it was much more abstract. It wasn't like fictionalized narrative. So I was so excited about it that I was telling everybody about the storylines in this, and it sucks because I have since forgotten. I remember like stray bits of it, but I would love to go back and reread it because I remember just being blown away by the Machiavellian schemes and the high stakes that George R.R. Martin maintains in what reads like more of a historical account,
Yes.
Well, okay, let's talk about that for a moment because I meant to bring that up. Let's talk about the value of in-universe storytelling to storytelling in general. I love in-universe storytelling. I have not read Fire and Blood yet. I'm about to. I'm telling everybody. But I'm just saying that in general, I love the idea of in-universe storytelling.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
In-universe,
Stories within stories.
Right. I'm not talking, when I'm talking about something that's told in-universe, I'm not talking about you or telling someone about a fantasy world. When you're telling a story in-universe, you are telling a story that is supposedly written by someone in the fantasy world who is relating a story about that world. And I love in-universe storytelling. It's an amazing and incredible
device,
technique, or device for relating fantasy information. I'm huge on that.
Well, and George correct me if I'm wrong, Retro, because I'm trying to go back and remember. It's told by Mushroom, right?
Yes.
Okay, and
that's one of them.
Correct me if I'm wrong again. So there's a dwarf, or he's like a Tyrion style. He's like a dwarf, and he's like the historian of the era. His name is Mushroom, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the book opens with kind of a warning. Another in-world character is like, hey, just so you know, the historian of this era is Mushroom. He's very unreliable.
Yeah.
And they kind of tell you don't believe this guy. And here's his story.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like tales from a certain point of view, and which also leaves you to the whole idea of interpretation, and they can do whatever they want on the series. It kind of opens up more creativity for them, but at the same time, I don't know, there's something about staying true to a book I also love.
Well, but you can actually subvert a book and stay true to it, because if you're good enough to get in there, like you just said, from a certain point of view, it's like, well, what would the other point of view be that would still work with why he's lying about it? You could subvert it in a very smart way, and still by proximity uphold the unreliable narrator version of events in an in-universe way, a twist. So you could still do it, but I think you have to have a good caliber writer knowing what they're doing to do it. Yeah. All too often in these days, you have a writer that doesn't, they might even be good writers. Who knows? But they don't take the time, it seems, to work it all out to see if it's a good idea or not. They just come up with an idea and they just write it. And then the rest of us on YouTube are like, that wasn't a good idea because you forgot this. And then they're like, screw you.
You're horrible. You're a horrible toxic fan.
Yeah, totally. That's like,
We
no,
were-
you have to go through and think through your plot twist. You have to think through your ideas and test them for a long time. Like you have to go through some stress tests to see if it's a good idea or not.
Yeah. It's really interesting because like I'll go back to the way I kind of describe the book versus the TV show. I think it's already set up, especially from the changes last season. I'm already acclimated to changes in the story because even like Rhaenyra's first husband, that story was changed severely. I forgot his name.
I think it's like Harlan Strong or something.
Yeah, one of the Strongs, and he his story was completely changed. And it was one of those things where I just was like, okay, I guess they're taking some liberties, and I'm not sure if it was him or who said the way to look at it is that these are two different universes, what's happening in the book and what's happening in the stories, or just like it's just being told in from a different body, somebody else that was there, what they saw.
Well, you can also appreciate the book and the movie. Like we were talking before you came on, Retro, about, and Heath went into passionate detail and had some great discussion on like Lord of the Rings, the written version versus and omissions from the movie and the movie version. And I'm also thinking of like The Shining. The Shining, the movie is very different from the book. And yet I love the movie The Shining. But when I read the book, I love the book. And it's almost like they're two separate works of art. And I can appreciate both because both are excellent.
Oh, I haven't read The Shining yet.
I feel like I need to write the screenplay for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So when they arrive in the open, what was it? Open copyright or whatever it is, or whatever. When they leave that, it will be time.
When they become available.
Yes.
Open source, public domain.
Yeah, public domain. When they become public domain. It'll be time.
When is that happening?
Shows, and they will be like, well, sooner rather than later. Come to think of
Hobbit, Part 2
sooner
by
than
Heath
later.
Robinson.
Yes, especially right
there. She
is.
Here we go. What's up, Retro?
Public domain.
You've made it to your space station.
I feel like I should have those things ready. Like I actually feel like I should. That like like when the Hobbit, because I have a specific way that I think the Hobbit should be told, and the way that I experienced the Hobbit as a child, and I feel like that. Oh my God, when the Hobbit becomes public domain, I should be ready to produce a Hobbit movie.
Wow.
So in the future, they'll say, "Have you read The Hobbit?" And they'll say, "Which one, Tolkien's or Robinson's?"
Right. You should read Tolkien's, but the screen adaptation should be like because you're right. Because I remember being in Moria. Like I remember like my mother reading me The Hobbit when we were in Moria, and I remember
too.
No, excuse me. Under the Misty Mountains. Under the Misty Mountains. When the Hobbit when you go under the Misty Mountains unto Goblin Town, and how horrific that was. Like how just absolutely horrific that scene was. And I would want to convey. I don't feel that the Hobbit movie that we got conveyed the absolute terror of being underground in the Misty Mountains with Goblin Town. And there's no way I would do that in a kitsy way, that like this is a terror thing. This is horror when you are in the Misty Mountains.
Well,
I would bring that.
That's the beauty of filmmakers. They see something in the writing that they internalize, like this is horror, this is terror. And then their job is to capture that and bring that onto the screen. And I think good filmmakers find that thread and they put it in there the right way. And sometimes that thing that they capture is contextualizes it. In fact, I would say that the film improved Gollum. I thought that Andy Serkis and Peter, like they did such a great job with Gollum that now that character was elevated to such a high degree, I thought, in the movies. So you could find something in the filmmaking process that might have been there in the book, and then you can elevate it.
No, right. No. Bacon Gaiman says, Heath, wait, wanting to make a well-known story for children and adults more brutal? That's way off brand for you. No, I know. I was actually, believe it or not, before this live stream started about 2 hours ago, I was like, I got to write the story about Santa Claus.
Ooh.
Just brutal. I mean, I want
a brutal Santa Claus.
I need like, because I wrote the dark story of the Christmas Massacre last year, but I was like, you know what I need to do right now? I need to really interpret a story where you got to really experience some brutal Santa Claus, like where the children are going to be drugged from their beds to hell. Like if they're bad children, like you did something bad, like Father Whip is going to show up and drag you to hell. And like on Sunday morning or on Christmas morning, your parents are going to show up to find your dead corpses. Like, I mean, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about.
Who's the audience for that?
Well, I don't know. I'm asked that all the time.
Gather round. Let me tell you guys.
I'm asked that all the time. I'm asked that all the time about Rabivania or the Trial of St. Gabriel or this. I'm like, no, I've decided, because I've actually thought about that, because people have been talking about, like, if you're writing for children, you can't say that. And I've decided, actually, I've been thinking about this a lot, Doug, like maybe I'm not writing for children. Okay.
You're not.
This is an animated story, but this is a story about like Father Whip who drags children to hell if they are bad. Maybe this isn't a children's story. Like,
it's not. So you know what I just thought of? Watership Down is a story about cute little bunnies, but it's a savage story.
Yeah.
I heard about that story.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Like,
I was horrified as a kid.
Right. So I'm thinking that, yeah, it doesn't matter if this is animated. I've been thinking about this a lot over the last 2 months. Like, maybe this is animated, but it doesn't matter that, okay, it's an animated story. It's not for children. This is something that,
correct,
like, I've been told, like with Rabivania, like originally I thought, okay, Rabivania is something for children. But then people were like, no, this is something, like, I was told for Rabivania that, oh no, maybe this might be something that's like for horrifically damaged children who are experiencing trauma, who are trying to cope with it.
Heath, check out Daniel's comment. I think it's perfect.
don't know. What was this?
It's
Daniel
like
says it's right for parents of 1,700. Yeah, right. Yes. Okay. Maybe that's it. So no, really, like literally in the past 2 months, I've been thinking like maybe I should just embrace that, because.
Well, actually, a lot of the old fairy tales and fables were pretty horrific when you trace them to their original meanings. And, you know, they were for kids. So they were really trying to scare the bejesus out of the kids.
They were meant to scare them. I mean, I think you could still do it where it's an adult for adults, but I'm sure some parents would show their kids, so you better be naughty. I mean, better not be naughty, or you're going to end up,
you know. Santa does to the naughty like
yeah.
So I don't know. I was thinking maybe I'd do Christmas Story this year.
I think it could be.
But man, this Christmas story is about it. You know, the one that I would tell is about one where if you're naughty, like Father Whip shows up to drag your soul to hell.
You just die.
So you want to add a little bit of Game of Thrones to Christmas.
Yeah.
To Christmas, right? Yeah, I know. Because I've been telling people, like, here's the story. Here's the dark story of the Christmas Massacre. I mean, all right, let's do it. Like, let's bring it.
That is awesome.
All right.
Instead of milking cookies, we're back to playing cheese.
Right. Yeah. The part about this show with the House of the Dragon in episode 3, we had to have this end episode. Like we have been dealing with the Greens, the Green faction. I feel like for a while, like, are you really going to go and do something? and I feel like that's part of why we had to have the scene with Rhaenyra and Alicent, because like, all right,
Yeah.
and I understand. Let's reach out. I'm not exactly sure what Rhaenyra was trying to deal with, because I mean, you've already had your son crowned king. I mean, there's a lot of things that have had like there's a lot of things that you can't just take back. You know, this has been going on, but I did appreciate that. I did appreciate the scene in that. Okay, what do we do? Is there some way to resolve this? I mean, going into this, I was like, no. And also, that's why I was like, this scene should not have happened like it should have, like we were talking about. Like it should have happened at a third location or something, as to not replicate what happened in the second season. That's not good storytelling. But if you had this encounter in different ways, like, okay, these two were childhood friends, and before we actually go balls to the wall with war, before we do that, we need to have these two characters at least confront each other. I'm okay with that idea.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm okay with that too. In fact, from a storytelling standpoint, it's always good to have characters of consequence in the same room with each other as best as you can. But the problem was the way they did it, they diffused all the tension of the scene. It's just two girls whispering in front of candles. You know, I think the one had a knife, right?
Yeah, there was a knife involved.
And I had to watch that a couple of times to understand who had the knife and what was wrong. I actually had to watch that a couple of times to understand.
Oh, wow.
Right.
It's not
I couldn't
clear.
even remember perfectly.
It was Rhaenyra that drew the knife.
Oh, it was Rhaenyra's.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
threatened like if you scream, I'll
if
just
you run,
kill you
I will
before.
kill you. Right. But
Yeah.
that took me
That's a
actually a
breakdown of
couple of
diplomacy
watch
right
throughs
there.
in order to understand.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, but that is how the storytellers instinctively knew this scene has no tension, you know, so you give one of them a knife. That what I'm trying to say is that's a low form of tension, because I don't think any of us believed that one of them would stab the other in earnest. So that's why you want all the guards there, because those guys might lose it, you know, and we believe that could happen, and we don't know, you know, what they're going to do. So I don't know. You want the tension, and you want the characters of consequence to be interfacing as much as possible with the highest stakes, and it was there. But I just thought an unusual solution to that was what they did.
Yeah, they had a better scene, I think, in the first season, where there was like a huge war about to happen, or it was concluding. I'm not sure which one, but they were on a bridge, and they kind of like made up then and struck a deal, and so there should have been something like that, and then just negotiations just fall apart, because even knowing that Rhaenyra is supposed to be queen, a lot of people just think that she's illegitimate because she's a woman. So, you know, you could play upon that. And of course, the son there saying, oh, no way, you're not taking my throne away from me. That's not going to happen. And I mean, it could become like this huge like fallout, and a lot of drama there, a lot of drama that they missed out on. I thought, though, it was something that we needed to actually see, which was the outright misinterpretation, or Alicent realizing she completely misinterpreted
that was an important part of
the series, and that was necessary. They just didn't do it in the proper way.
But it was satisfying to see her kind of squirm for a second.
Yeah, it was satisfying.
Yeah,
it was satisfying, and there were quite a few moments in the episode where I thought I wasn't sure how they were handling a lot of the things, like the brothel scene. That was like, okay, what are we doing here? Do we have time for this? I was just sort of like, what's happening? You know, I understand we're getting more character development. We're getting more character development for
and a little bit more male nudity that I thought we don't need.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, I was fine with the nudity, but I just was sort of like, are we gonna establish something else about that character? Because we basically got exactly what we needed to get from him about that particular situation in episode 2. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, wait, okay, so we're going back to this again. It's sort of like a little bit like writing in circles, but at least they're writing a story, which I can't say for a lot of other shows.
Right.
They at least have like, okay, this character is this, and this character, they have defined the characters and their desires and their motivations. I just would like to see less spinning for time and more action and doing.
So I agree with you. When I saw episode 1, my impression was that they hit the ground running, like shit's about to get crazy, right?
Yes.
And then now there were 2 episodes down the road, and I'm like, shit's about to get crazy here soon. So I am waiting. I'm still waiting for it.
Yes, brilliant. Well said. It's just
I will say, Retro, your analysis of the brothel scene, I think, is really good. The only thing I'll credit it with is at least you're having a confrontation where something could go awry. My problem was it ended with he strutted off pretty good, For
I like that.
Dude, it was like, that was pretty confident walking off. But it's like, they just diffused it. Like no one attacked them. Like, you set up this high stakes and then the other guy just walks away. I was like, well, you're missing the point of the tension.
Yeah. I thought that they were going to kill his mistress, and that would have really created something spicy.
That would have been good.
And because then now he hates his brother even more and has something to prove. So now he needs to win this war so he can end up on top.
Well, and in a lot of these like Byzantine, and I use that in the classic sense. I know I write Byzantine, but like in these Byzantine stories where you have like all these scheming and machinations and Machiavellian plot lines, a lot of it is who can maneuver into another insult that takes it right to the line and then leaves whoever throws the first punch usually is the loser, right? Morally. So if you can insult, and you have to find more maneuvering to insult that person. That would have been what Retro just said would have been a good way to do that. You add one more insult by killing the mistress. And now what are you going to do? If you throw the first punch, if you kill someone here, then you've already lost the upper hand in that moral argument, or the argument of public opinion. Like Rhaenyra did, the idea of losing in the arena of public opinion when Daemon sent in the assassins and he killed the baby. They pinned it all on Rhaenyra, right? Publicly.
Yes.
So now she's like stigmatized over that. That's how you can lose, and that's why those little maneuvers of adding an insult before crossing the line is so important. Because if you can get the other person across the line before you, you can now send out the town criers and say, stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still haven't forgiven Daemon for doing that.
Oh, you know what the worst part is? And I hate it. When they went to assassinate, you could like hear it. The sounds of it was so effing awful. I don't cringe too often when I watch movies. I can tear up for whatever reason. I can get emotional watching a story, but I usually don't cringe too often. But that one made me cringe. Like hands on. I was like, oh my God. I could live the rest of my life and never hear that again.
What did?
Yeah.
When they killed the baby, it's done off screen, thankfully, but they showed just enough to let you know what's about to happen. And then they like turn up the volume and you just hear terrible sounds. And I hated it. I hated it.
Yeah. Well, this episode, they did show us a little, sort of the result of that. Daemon having this like fantasy nightmare kind of hallucination, feeling maybe some guilt for what he did. Just kind of like human of him.
Remind me of I remember realizing it was a dream sequence. Can you describe it?
Oh gosh, do you want me to? Very
for it.
young, a very young Rhaenyra from season 1. So
Right.
this is like
yeah.
his imagination of how he still sees her, which is really
Right.
beautifully done. I was like, ooh, I see what you did there. And you know, I forgot exactly what she said to him, but she is sewing back on the.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, I won't say the rest.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like, ooh, that's eerie, but also like you can see how he, you know, it's unrepairable what he did.
Yeah, unforgivable.
Yeah, she's trying to repair it, but it's unrepairable. And so
Yeah.
and who's taking the blame for it? She is. And that's
Oh,
why
yeah, it's all
she's
pinned on
and
her.
that's why she's So there's a
I
lot
will-
of little moments there that I just loved, and of course the young lady saying, "This is where you're gonna die," which is you know, kind of. If you've read the books and you know why that's sort of important because of what happens later, but I'm not sure exactly if the writers here are going to take it to that level, or if they're going to change things around a little bit because Damon and I forget, eye patch guy, I forgot his name.
Damon and Aemon.
Damon and Aemon, they have to face off. Well, they do in the book, and so it's like this thing. They're so much alike. They even, like in a weird way, admire each other. If you notice small little micro facial expressions between the two of them in season 1, and there is a bit of admiration.
Interesting.
For the other, and I like the way they size each other up. They're like, okay. It's just wonderful. I was like, you know,
but I like you.
yeah. Okay. I see you.
Interesting. That's a pretty good observation. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, and it would have been really great if they could have made a great team together, but because they're on opposite sides, they must clash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
imagine
will
Damon
say-
going up against that huge dragon. That's going to be so good.
Man, I watched a clip of that when the big dragon bites the smaller one in half.
Oh,
I forget
so sad.
that. What a scene that was in the storm and everything with Luke, the prince.
Yeah, right.
Just incredible. One thing I will say that what were you going to say?
Well, one of the best things about that is just there's that one moment where you see the little prince, the little dragon, and then you see this big shadow behind him.
Oh
It's
my
like,
God,
wow.
yes.
I was like,
Yes.
oh God, he's gonna die.
It's coming.
Great.
That's right. And man, it was done so brutally and savagely, like
And
animalistically.
quickly.
Yeah, it reminded me of like a dinosaur tearing apart like
Yes.
an antelope or something. It looked like a force of nature more so than just an attack. And it was very
so
brutal,
crazy.
and that set the tone, man, right there.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say was I was surprised, not necessarily disappointed or anything, but just surprised that Damon admits to making a mistake. Rhaenyra's like yelling, she's scolding him for what he did and really chastising him. And he goes, "It was a mistake." And I was like, you just disavowed what you did. Like, I was surprised that he backed down to that. I'm not saying it was bad, but it was surprised me. I wouldn't have expected him to do that.
Well, I
But
think
he
what
does
they're
want- he
setting
does-
up, one thing that they're setting up is that all of these things that happen seem to be misunderstandings or things that went out of hand. Like with Aemon, killing the prince is sort of like, that he didn't really mean to do that. In the books, he meant to do it. But in the story, he didn't really mean to kill that
the
boy.
dragon disobeyed.
Yeah.
And killed the other
Which is
dragon.
which is really interesting right there. And then also with Damon just like giving instructions to take a son, but got the wrong one. So they were supposed to get Aemon, and
Right.
and that really was what happened. They just said, well, we can't get him. He's gone. So let's go for the next, best thing.
I will say, when I was watching that assassination episode, the first episode, those two guys go in there, and they carry all the air of guys that aren't like great at their job. They're like good enough to get it. There's a little bit of like B+ quality to them, and they're like, which one is the son? And I'm thinking, dude, you're gonna have to kill all of them. I mean, like, why are you wasting time haggling over this? Like, the queen is there, the kids are there. Like, I was surprised they dragged that scene on, like trying to figure out which one to kill so long when they're assassins. Like, it seems like you've already been compromised. Kill them all at this point.
They didn't know
right?
what to do.
Well,
They were not. They were.
Yeah. In the books, they're just so much more savage and psychological torturers, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Like, because the way they set it up was they were going to leave some of them alive, and there were two sons. Do you guys know about this part?
Yeah. There were two sons, not a son and a daughter, right?
Yeah. There were two sons, and they were supposed to. They asked the mom to pick one or the other, and she picked one, but instead of killing that one, and killed the other son, and then told that son, "Your mother wanted you dead." And it's like, oh my God! And the relationship,
which seems like a lot greater drama to me.
Yeah. And it's just so sad.
Yeah, why would they change that then?
That they changed it because it would have been more like that the loss of her son that was killed, and also the loss of now the connection with her living son would be even more devastating.
That sounds like a lot more drama to me. That sounds like a way to go to me.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
and if my job was to adapt this, that would be a scene that I would want to get just right. I wouldn't want to. It'd be weird for me to want to change a scene that's working.
I know those guys. Like,
It sounds
I
like
can't
that.
be mad at them too much because they're getting a lot of it right.
Right.
But also, I'm also there's the changes that they're making. I don't feel the improvements. Do you know what I mean?
You feel like it's more of a lateral move, if not a step back a little bit.
Yeah, in a
It's
way
not ruining it, but
to spin up the story and make it last longer, because we've already been greenlit for a season 3.
Oh, we have.
Which is
Yeah,
and I'm like, wait a minute, how are you going to have season 3? Because things are supposed to pick up and get very, very nasty at this point. So I feel like there's a lot of spin going on, a lot of like a little airtime. It's not badly done, but if you don't know about the original work, I'm not sure how much you're gonna really feel like it's missing.
Well, that's true. I think that like you're actually pointing this stuff out now. I'm like, oh man, they shouldn't have changed that. Now they shouldn't have changed. So now I'm seeing flaws based on the comparison.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I didn't necessarily see a flaw before.
It's some of the best stuff that we've been getting in a long, long time. Okay, it's really, really good. So
I agree. I loved the show.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. And like I said, I love the idea of them playing chess and playing, and sacrificing pieces and stuff like that, because we don't get that kind of like high level thinking stuff anymore. It's just really
and it is okay in my mind to be critical of something you think falls short when you're judging it at a high level. You're judging it at a high level because you love it. You think it's a great story. You think it's a great show, and you're criticizing it because you're giving it all the credit of a high quality show, and there's room for criticism there. That's the best form of criticism you can give it. And that's a far cry from us, like let's say something like The Acolyte, where they're missing the point entirely. And the criticism is really like 101, like at the basic level, there's so much criticism. But it's good to criticize something at that high level. Heath had a great analysis of a character that was omitted from Lord of the Rings. And I was listening to him. I was like, man, that is a great take on that. And it's again, it comes from a place of love, even though it's criticism. So there's definitely space for that. And I think it's a good space.
Yeah. I think this is a great show. I mean, I know a lot of people were upset about the nudity. It was kind of funny, but I thought it was cool.
Boy, that's interesting.
Yeah, because there used to be a lot more nudity in a lot of for HBO.
Oh yeah, big time.
And so I didn't really look at it as like, oh, this is a moment where like a sexy time or anything. It was just a dude standing up and like saying like, I'm proud to be who I am.
Yeah.
And just walked away from the hoodlums, if you will, which happens to be the king.
Right.
And he has more dignity and more grace than even his brother. I mean,
so you're saying that it was actually appropriate to the message of the scene?
Yes, he's absolutely. I think you learn a little bit more about him. But again, I thought maybe something a little bit juicier, like them like doing something terrible to his mistress would have. And there's still time, because to next episode, we could find out something different, but something in which we felt like they're trying to take everything away from him, and he's like, he doesn't have much, right? He's got the dragon and he's got his pride, and he's got his brothel lady. And so what else does he have? He doesn't have like real relations with other people that much,
Yeah, his character's grown on me. I thought he was pretty two-dimensional early on in season 1. It's like, they gave him an eye patch, and then they did give him the story with the eye being cut out and everything. But I thought other than that, he was just kind of brooding for a couple episodes. But as the series has wore on, his character has kind of taken on a lot of he does steal some scenes now when he's in there, kind of like Damon does. Damon steals scenes when he's in it.
Oh yeah. That's why I want to see those two like clash.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be awesome. It's all set up. Like the game board is set up. At this point, we need to see an attack on the queen. We need to see the pawns start going down. I want to see them sending in the big pieces.
We have spent a lot of time with dealing with. Okay, are we going to do this? We spent a lot of time with that. 3 episodes. Yeah. All right, it's time.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'll say this. I love dragons, and I think most people do. And there's something about them, the way they look, these giant reptilian creatures that breathe fire with these massive wings. And I think House of Dragon and Game of Thrones have given us some of the best dragons ever.
What they're using. they're really great.
Like when they're used, they're terrifying. And even in Game of Thrones, when they were like little baby dragons, it's like that baby raptor scene in Jurassic Park when it's hatching, and you're like, oh, look at that cute raptor. But in the back of your head, that it's super dangerous. They captured all that in the in Game of Thrones with the little dragons. So, but before that, I thought one of the scariest dragons was from Dragon Slayer. There's an old movie from like the early 80s.
Okay. I love that movie.
About that. Yes.
Dragon Slayer. And it's cool because they rarely showed it. You would just hear like it's breathing in the background, like off screen, and then you'd see like what it does.
That was a puppet. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was awesome. But anyway, I feel like Game of Thrones has finally delivered, and now House of the Dragon by tradition finally delivered on just excellent dragons, and they have different body shapes. That one is like long, So anyway,
they've really thought about this. They've built out this world. I think I love spending time in this world, and so I don't mind. Sometimes when things don't go fantastic, but I'm like, it's still within its world that they've created works to a certain degree.
Right.
Sometimes like small things may pull me out, but on the most part, I do like. I feel like they're doing a great job.
Well, a
Um,
lot of stories can make missteps,
mhm.
but they're not making like an egregious error. And that's important because, you can even analyze A New Hope and find little mistakes that were
Oh
made.
yeah, yeah.
And yet we forgive all of those because the overarching story was so good and the mistakes that were made were so small,
Mhm.
it don't matter. Versus an egregious error that kind of undermines the whole story or pulls you out to the point that you can't engage with the story you're watching,
Yeah.
And I don't think they've made the egregious errors here at all.
No, 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 no. They still really, kept things within world. And what I do love is that, like, I know some people who've seen Game of Thrones, which I haven't. They're really pulling out pieces that they can nibble on that are, like, oh, this is Stark's great grandfather or whatever. So and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And they're like, yeah, and the keep, and I'm like, oh, all right, that's really cool. Like, I'm
Well,
learning
Retro,
from
in
these guys.
episode 3, do you remember the scene where they introduced some dragon eggs?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so there's some dragon eggs. Those eggs survive
Mhm.
and become the only surviving eggs for Game of Thrones when Daenerys. Those become the dragons for Daenerys Targaryen.
Yes, yes, I heard. I heard.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes,
That is really cool.
this is what I love about the internet too. Like the nerds, they just get this stuff and just go crazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like, oh yeah, I know now. I feel smart.
Yeah, you get to know all these things, and you start to get a bigger picture in your head, and you feel smarter.
Yes, yes, yes. Because I know, let's see, I know Heavy Spoilers and Screen Rant, and there's one other one that they did a full deep dive on everything, and I was like, oh, cool. And I play it at twice the speed, and I'm like, oh, I'm smart.
Yeah, Screen Rant is pretty good at like picking very specific things out and laying it all out for you. They do a good
Yeah.
job of that. The Easter eggs and everything.
Oh yeah, the Easter eggs, yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. One thing about this age is we're able to have these conversations about this. I remember watching it and just thinking like, oh my God, who can I talk to about this? And when I got Heath's message, I was like, yes, okay. And I actually have to leave in like a few minutes, but
Yeah.
to go to my own live stream
You're-
that I have to do.
You're on your.
Awesome.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. You're about to go to your live stream on your own channel, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I have gargoyles.
Oh yeah, that's an
the
ongoing series, right?
yes, yes. And it's we're at the end of season 2, and it's the big finale. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. But my God, guys, I love hanging out with you.
Yeah.
And I love chatting with you about this kind of stuff because I don't get a chance to do that. I don't know why, but
No, it's funny. You were just saying that, and there are times at work I'm like, man, did you see this thing? And they're just like, yeah, what are you talking about? And I'm like, man, like I'm really into the show and this and that. And sometimes you get some blank stares, and then other times sometimes you get people who really know what they're talking about. But it is rare to be able to plug in all the way and just run with it. I love that.
Yeah, and then if somebody doesn't understand, there is like, okay, well, can you explain it? And then as you do, you get more of a a conversation about it, and not so much you're a total nerd, aren't you? Like, yes,
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
and I'm proud.
Yeah, what's funny is when I was a kid, being a nerd was not cool.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was not cool either.
Not cool. And now it's like it is cool. And now I have all the knowledge that it takes to be a nerd. So.
Oh man, sometimes I have the knowledge to be a nerd. Sometimes it's like,
Well, yeah, no one has.
Remember.
Yeah, we all have to pick our lanes,
Right.
but there's still
Yes.
Tell everybody go over to your channel, Retro.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. You guys are so sweet.
That's awesome. I'm glad you came on to talk about this with us. That is awesome seeing you.
Yeah. I mean, Game of Thrones, it's offering something that, like I said, is not necessarily out there. And I think it has to do, like, Max, HBO Max, they just have a way of producing really good serial content, and that's something of a talent right now, because a lot of places don't seem to have it down. Like Disney's been really awash with that. I don't know what's going on there, but Amazon's not too bad, but it's like a hit and miss almost. Like, oh, sometimes they get a good one, and sometimes they're like, oh. But House of Dragons really is offering grown up adult entertainment that's actually like fun, and
totally,
dragons.
I mean, what more do you want?
We need more dragons.
These guys walked up to essentially a dead franchise, knocked on the door, set the basket down, and we took it. And we're like, we're back. We're in.
Yeah, we are back.
And there's more story to tell, because I know that there's an earlier story with the original Aegon, or is it
Jaehaerys?
The original, like
Aegon the Conqueror?
Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters. And that's another one that's really like an intriguing story that I hope that they develop.
Yeah, Fire and Blood actually covers 400 years of Targaryen rule, and it's like all these different generational stories, and they're all brutal and phenomenal in their own way. So there's a lot of source material there, right?
Yes. You guys have to, like, if you can't read the book, at least go on the internet and find that there are quite a few people who have broken down the story for you. If you're like, I don't have hours and hours in my day right now, but these guys will tell you the whole thing in like 20 minutes. They'll break everything down for you. Well, anyway, guys, I love you guys so much.
Everybody, head over to Retro
having me.
Channel to watch.
Awesome. See you, Retro.
All right. See you guys later.
Later, Retro. Thank you so much for coming.
That is awesome that she came by, that she was able to join this conversation.
I am so glad that she was here.
Yeah, well, and she actually remembers the book very well, so she was able to add a lot of commentary there.
Right.
That
I've got to read all of that and bring all of that in.
Yeah, I see. I read it, but I didn't retain it 5 years later. So I do need to go back and reread it. I do remember loving it, and I remember being kind of like amazed at how much drama that book has, page after page after page, and all these tales, almost like historical tales.
Right.
Anyone who loves history, which is probably a lot of guys in this chat, and I know you do, Heath, when you read a book about a historical era, it can become so captivating. Whether you're reading about Napoleon or the Byzantine Empire or the Roman Empire, you can just get lost in the reality of the story. And Fire and Blood has that quality to it.
Yes.
So I got to go back.
All right, I'm going to go get it and bring it on so we can get all this done. We'll talk about it. All right, thank you so much, Doug. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. We'll be here. Everybody, go check out Retro's channel. She's doing more. We will be here soon. Thank you, everyone who is here watching live, and also everyone who is watching here on replay. Thank you so much. I will see you later. Yes.
Real quick, right before the sign off, we might want to think about Dragon Slayer. It's like
we should totally do Dragon Slayer.
Secret favorite of mine, and I noticed a lot of people in the chat chiming in, so I think I'm not alone.
We should totally do Dragon Slayer. I'm sure Retro would be in on that.
Totally.
Yes, Retro. Yes, Dragon Slayer is absolutely a film that we should watch. I remember when my uncle showed me Dragon Slayer. I remember that. So yes. All right, everyone. Yes, we should do that. Everyone, have a wonderful evening. Later.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.